Justin Herbert out for the season. Some thoughts on the Chargers. And then a little Middlekauff mailbag. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Get your question answered here on the show. Very, very easy to do. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you go subscribe. Go subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Leave a comment. Interact. Share with your friends. Share with your enemies. Appreciate everyone that's done that. Also, we have a podcast, 3 and Out. Go subscribe there as well. Apple, Spotify, you name it. We got you covered. Thevolume.com. I'm rocking merch right now. And before we dive into the Chargers situation, I need to tell you about my friends. They're the official ticketing app of this podcast, and they go by Gametime. Go to your smartphone, download the Gametime app. When you do that, buy a pair of tickets. It's Christmas right around the corner. Hanukkah going on as we speak. Give out a present. Do something good for someone and save a little money while you're at it. Concerts, football games, basketball games, hockey games. Use the promo code JOHN when you buy your first pair of tickets and save $20. So it's the season of giving and ideally the season of saving, especially in these inflationary times. So you can save $20, get a pair of tickets. You Dodger fan? You want to get Dodger season tickets? You want to go to opening night? I got you covered. Watch Ohtani and Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. Gametime, promo code JOHN. I think 2 years ago, I picked the Chargers to go to the Super Bowl and to be a Super Bowl contender, to win the AFC. Obviously, I look like an idiot. I think this year I picked Justin Herbert to be an MVP. That clearly is not going to happen. But ultimately, one thing I've never been wrong about is Brandon Staley, and I don't have any energy or effort to talk about that anymore. That's well established. He's not a good coach. I think this is more of a reflection, this situation, of the Chargers organization. Why would you spend, $100,000 on a car, buy a Mercedes, buy a nice car, and then not get the oil changed or not mess with the brakes when they need changing? It's like the Chargers are willing to spend on players. Of course they are. That is money that basically you have to spend on the players. You look around the NFL, the majority of teams over a several-year period don't have huge gaps in the salary cap, right? This is not Major League Baseball. We get teams like the Pirates and the A's and Tampa Bay Rays that don't spend nearly as much as the next team. Now, it changes on a year-to-year basis, but every team has the money to pay their own players, and most teams, if they think they're semi-competitive, usually get close to that cap max, right? Where you separate yourself is how you spend off the field. The Chargers pay $1 in rent, and I've said over and over, they're never leaving, so it's not like I'm advocating for them to go back to San Diego because I know that's not possible. But it's never going to work in LA, ever. Just like Steve Ballmer, he can build the coolest arena possible. No one is ever going to give a shit. They just will not. And I think the same is true with the Chargers. But ultimately, who cares? Because you have a quarterback that you should be able to compete. You should be able to make playoff runs. But the only way to make consistent playoff runs is to pay a coach. And to buy and pay for a quarterback at the money which they're going to give Justin Herbert over the next several years and not do everything humanly possible to invest in the other most important guy in your building baffles me. And that to me is the head coach. And when I see the names being talked about, who's going to be the next head coach of the Chargers, I don't think they can afford to hire a coordinator because the risk on hiring a coordinator is too much of a coin flip. Right? For every Andy Reid or McVay or Shanahan that come out of the coordinator ranks, there are a lot of terrible coaches that do not last long. And you can't risk that when you have a high-priced quarterback who has a ton of talent. Because they did this with Phillip Rivers forever. And listen, Herbert is more talented than Phillip, stronger arm, more mobile, basically just as big. But there's no guarantee that he's going to have Phillip's career if you keep throwing him over their head off of football coaches. You will continue to lose. Let's just look at your division. You currently have Andy Reid, who let's just say makes $20 million and is currently the best head coach in the NFL. Been to 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 or 6 years, won a couple of them, and is going nowhere with an all-time quarterback. You have an $18 million a year coach with the Denver Broncos who has resurrected that franchise. And let's face it, his resume would say he's going to win. So if you want to just be obsessed with going cheap with your head coach, I have no sympathy for you. And I'm just going to stop talking about them if they go down that road again. If Mike Tomlin were to be fired, when Bill Belichick is available, Jim Harbaugh, these are the type individuals that you must be talking to. You need to get a guy that knows what they are doing. You can't keep hiring these Anthony Lynn's, Brandon Staley's, Mike McCoy's, who are never going to be head coaches again. It is such a disservice to the talent on your team and the quarterback. And the reality is Tom Telesco, most general managers do not get to hire 4 coaches. So more than likely, he's done. But you can never say never. The Chargers are a true family operation. Their sons play a role in personnel. And listen, historically, definitely in my adult life, personnel has not been their issue. They have always had good players. Let's think about the other team in their division. The thing we shit on with the Raiders forever is they always pick the wrong guys in the draft. It's like, you took this guy, but you could have had this guy. You can do that like every year for like 2 decades with the Raiders. The Chargers draft a lot of good players, and they have a stud quarterback. But if they're going to continue to go cheap on the coach, the same thing is going to continue to happen. And listen, I expect that. I don't expect them to be in the Harbaugh mix, to be in the Belichick mix. I hope I'm wrong. I watch a lot of Charger games, definitely because of Justin Herbert, and I did with Phillip Rivers. Partly I live on the West Coast, but I enjoy watching those quarterbacks play football. But if they don't hire the correct coach or even make an effort to, they have no one to blame but themselves. And how could you look at your football team and look at the results and not think something dramatic needs to change? Like, if you don't and you do the same thing over, what do they say the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And that's what I expect the Chargers to do. I hope I'm wrong because I'm a fan of football. I like to see good coaches with good quarterbacks, but it's hard to believe that. Now, this feels like the season from hell, but they had some of those with Phillip Rivers too. And they would just go out and just hire Brandon Staley or hire Anthony Lynn. It'd be the same shit over and over. It's just kind of a sad state of affairs, right? It really is. They don't belong in Los Angeles. They have no fans, and they just refuse to hire a coach that anyone else around the league really values. So it just sucks because having good players, I mean, they just basically, I think they put, I mean, it's not their stadium, but made him whatever, the equivalent of like retiring your number or putting your name up in the rafters, Antonio Gates. I mean, Antonio Gates, Rivers, Breeze, LaDainian Tomlinson, Sean Merriman. I mean, they've just had to this crew, Keenan Allen, to Derwin James, to Joey Bosa. Some of these guys have battled injuries, but talent has never been their issue. Like, think how many teams you go, God, this team just can't figure it out. They just always have shitty players. They just never get the right. That's never been this franchise's problem. They have always had talented players. They have just had a cheap mindset, and I truly believe this. And you probably get tired of me hearing this. I think once you're super rich at the level in which you have money like the Spanoses and you are that cheap, it's a disease. And it's a disease you can't shake. Like, there's no rehab for that disease. And listen, I've always said, I understand people that are cheap that don't have money. I understand people that are cheap that are trying to build a business. When you have an operation like this that is pumping you that much cash and you're worried about saving $3 or $4 million on a head coach, shame on you. But again, it's hard. Shame on you. It's a disease they have, which I don't know if his children have it, but Dean definitely has proven time and time again that he can't get out of his own way when it comes to spending money on a head coach. And now we'll see. Like, I really do believe Tomlin might not be the head coach the next year of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, they just lost to 2 teams with a combined 4-20 record. I think it's the first time in NFL history someone's lost back-to-back games by 2 teams that were under 8 games or 8 games under 500. Like, that's one of the most embarrassing 2-game stretches you'll ever see. And there's no hope like in the future. Like, it's over with Bill. It's over. Harbaugh, who knows? Like, he might be available. Like, if you're not talking to those coaches and you're worried about like, oh, let's talk to Bobby Slowick, which Bobby Slowick might be really good in the future. You can't risk it. Not at this point in time in your franchise history. Get a little juice and get someone with some pelts on the wall that knows what they're doing. Can you believe we're this deep into the NFL season? We got to make every second count. With Draftking Sportsbook, you can make the most out of every game. Bet on your favorite teams for a shot at winning big bucks. New customers can score 150 instantly in bonus bets for betting $5 on any matchup. So right now, get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the app now and use the code JOHN. New customers can score 150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on the NFL. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Let's get to the Middlekauff mailbag. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram fire in those DMs, and we'll start with Wade. I'm wondering why there isn't any talk about Eric Bieniemy and his departure from the Chiefs being a big reason for the dip in offensive production. Obviously, Andy is the mastermind, but it usually is the OC that implements the game plan and works throughout the details throughout the week. That seems to be the Chiefs' biggest problem on offense, is attention to detail. Philly and Nick Sirianni have regressed offensively when they lose Shane to Indy, but nobody mentions Eric in Kansas City. What are your thoughts? Well, I think this one's pretty simple. Shane went to Indianapolis and is kicking ass and taking names with Gardner Minshew. The other thing is Shane called the plays. Andy called the plays. You don't just hand Andy the game plan. When you're the offensive coordinator, you develop the game plan. That's why we're so hard on Brandon Staley and keep asking him if he's going to call the plays. He's not just calling the plays on Sunday. He's implementing that game plan with his assistant coaches throughout the week. Now, if Eric Bieniemy had gone to Washington and they had lit the world on fire and this was happening to the Chiefs, it would be very valid. But at one point in time this season, not that long ago, they were on pace to break David Carr's single season record for sacks in a season. They were a disaster. So part of it is, what do you do? The reason Belichick got a lot of shit when Tom left, because his team won the Super Bowl. Washington's a fucking joke. So how do I even know Eric Bieniemy knows what he's doing? Right? Shane Steichen, I know he knows what he's doing. I'm watching the Colts. He's the offensive coordinator. He's got his backup quarterback, and they're winning games. They're 7-6. They were terrible last year. I'm watching Washington. They were better last year. So I think it's part of the yin and yang. Right? One thing struggles. Well, where that person went that left your organization, what's he doing? That would be my comment on that. Eagles fan. And I've been seeing multiple fans on Twitter saying they'd rather get the 2 seed than the 1 seed to get the Lions in the second round instead of the Cowboys. I feel like getting the bye and home field advantage takes precedent over any future matchup. That is not even a question. One, you're not guaranteed to get the Cowboys because, right, the Niners would be 2-7. So let's just say they play the Packers. Niners win. Let's say the Lions play the Rams. Are the Lions a lock to win that game? What if the Rams win that game and you're the 1 seed? Then you play the Rams and the Niners play the Cowboys. So I don't think you ever think like that. You would always rather have the bye and the 1 seed. The other thing the 1 seed guarantees that the 2 seed does not is everything comes to you. So, okay, yeah, you get the 2 seed, you get the Lions, and then what if the Niners beat the Cowboys? And you got to go to San Francisco. So I think that has to play, come into play there. Big fan of the show, listening since you started. Love you're a 49ers fan like myself. Hopefully this is the year. Do you think we can keep this team together past this season? Why would we lose to sign? Who would we lose to sign Ayuk? Also, I'm from London, Ontario. I'm from London on ON. Maybe I'm an idiot. The UN. Coming to Arizona next week for the game. Is scalping tickets a bad idea? And if we only get time for 1 round of golf, which course would you recommend? I would go like Raven, Whirlwind. They're a little less crazy. It depends. If you want to spend some money, I'd go TPC or I'd go Troon or I would go Greyhawk. But if you want to go a little cheaper, I think you can never go wrong with the Raven or Whirlwind. Scalping tickets. Just download the Gametime app, promo code John. Get yourself $20 off your pair of tickets. Here's the thing. Brandon Ayuk is a $20 million a year player. And the 49ers benefit from having Purdy not making any money, but they have a lot of high-priced guys. Trent makes a ton. Bosa makes a ton. Debo makes a ton. Kittle makes a ton. Fred Warner makes a ton. Eric Armstead makes a ton. Hargrave makes a ton. It's hard to keep all these guys. Now, Eric Armstead has been the nominee for Man of the Year. His nickname in the organization is the Blueprint because of his character, the way he acts. Now, he's not quite as good of a player as he once was. He's definitely pretty banged up, but they freaking love him. Now, he makes a lot of money. Now, it's hard. And one thing I learned in the NFL, like when I'd be pounding the table, when I was doing like watching guys on practice squads, like we should sign this guy. He's an upgrade over this guy. Well, yeah, we value what he does in the locker room. And that's where it gets really complicated. Obviously, they value Ayuk as well. Fred's going nowhere. I would say Kittle, Debo are going nowhere. They'll take Trent as long as he'll stay. I don't know. It gets very, very complicated. And this is what makes running an NFL operation difficult. What would Bill Belichick have done? If the Patriots were to win the Super Bowl, or excuse me, the Niners were to win the Super Bowl, like the Patriots back in the day, he would trade Brandon Ayuk for a first-round pick and draft a receiver, right? Or draft whoever and use that and allocate that money other places. So I'm not advocating getting rid of Brandon Ayuk, but this is a business. And I wouldn't want to get rid of Armstead either, but I would choose Ayuk over Armstead. But I know the way NFL teams think, they value a lot what Armstead brings to the table. So it becomes very complicated very fast. This guy, how is your attention to detail so good? It's something I wish I had more of. I like this guy. You know, we could argue if my attention to detail is that good, but viewer from Europe. God, we're going international. Watching you since the beginning of last season and really love your clear-cut takes and your realistic approach to things happening in football. My question take is about the Bengals. It looks pretty likely that they will draft in the top 10. I don't know about that. Aren't they 7-6 right now? What do you think they should do with the pick? Well, this was November 30th. What's the date? December 12th. Yeah, I mean, it shows you it looked pretty disastrous a couple weeks ago. Then all of a sudden, Jake Browning, I don't know, has the greatest 2-week stretch of his career. And this shows you, this is why investing in young quarterbacks, their character matters so much. Because how hard are you going to work? How serious are you going to take your craft? How much are you going to do everything humanly possible to improve? I think about this in my profession. I'm sure many people listening think about it in theirs. Like, how do I get better? How do I improve? Like the most successful people, up until the moment maybe they sell their business or retire or whatever, to me are always are curious for improvement in what they're doing to make their business bigger, better. And for a lot of us, it's, you know, some sort of whatever we do for sales, right? Marketing, whatever. Like in football, like you have to improve your body, your mechanics, your ability to complete throws, your arm strength, whatever it may be. And Jake Browning has made you look like, I mean, a season in tatters, a devastating injury, ruining it all to, holy shit, do we have like a legit backup quarterback? Do we have a guy that other teams are going to want? And he deserves credit. Zach Taylor deserves credit. The organization deserves credit. So it's pretty cool to watch, not going to lie. You rail on cheap NFL owners charging for the good food from cafeteria. What can an owner do within the rules of the NFL to make a team desirable places beside his salary, which has a cap? Honestly, it's just money. You notice, like, even for as cheap as Arizona is, if they're willing to pay a player, that player is going to go to the Arizona Cardinals. So just because I charge you styrofoam or your cup or whatever, some stupid moronic thing that no other team does, if I'm a free agent and the highest offer I have is $2.5 million a year, and the Cardinals offer me $4 million, like I don't care about any of that stuff. And that, to me, this is not college football, right? And even college football now, it's like, well, who's offering the most in NIL? It just happens to be the biggest, best programs. But I don't think it matters at all. Honestly, like one iota. Why has the NFL resisted full-time officials? I have yet to see a valid argument. Go Dogs. I'm assuming he means the Fresno State Bulldogs, but he could mean, I don't think he means the Georgia Bulldogs because they do DAWGs, the Dogs. The Bulldogs just do the Bulldogs. I would say it's pretty simple. If I ran the NFL, okay, make them full. What the fuck do they do all week? Is it mandatory that they move to an NFL city and then they have to be at practice throughout the week? Like, how do you really improve at your craft? What's the difference of just being a part-time referee and a full-time referee beside it costs me more? Like, is there a benefit from them Monday, Tuesday, Thursday? What the hell are they doing that's any different than now? You can't just be like practicing your referee skills 24/7, 365. I'm sure a lot of these guys in their free time watch a little film, do some stuff, but there's only so much you can do. Because I was probably like you, it's easy to go, wow, make them full time. That'll solve the issue. Would it? Honestly, would it have any impact? I don't know. Unless you made them move to an NFL city, but that assumes, like, what if the coach doesn't want them around on a given day? And they only practice 3 days a week. So what are they doing the other two? I think it's just basic, like, economics. What would it really change? Because it's easy to say, make them full-time employees. Okay, so what are they doing Monday through Friday? That's that much different than what they're doing now. The top 10 quarterbacks by passer rating this week was just funny. Quarterbacks today get more reps in training from early as middle school. And with the transfer portal, guys are staying in college longer. Do you think that the performances of backup quarterbacks, lower drafted quarterbacks will help fix the quarterback inflation in the league? Or just on the side, even inflate the importance of investing in a well-compensated backup? Here were some of the names of quarterback ratings last week. Jake Browning, Brock Purdy, Zach Wilson, Bailey Zappi, Tommy DeVito, Stafford, Dak, Lamar, Flacco, Drew Lock. It's hard because ideally, if I knew I'd get my starter in the 5th round, like if I knew Sam Howell was going to be Brock Purdy, Sam Howell is 100% like a no-brainer pick, right? Because you get him on this cheap deal. But what if he's just kind of good, but not quite good enough? It's why the quarterback inflation is always going to be a real thing, right? Sometimes you can go into an area in a city, in a community, in a state, and find a gem real estate-wise, right? Like you can find something for $500,000, which for whatever reason, different circumstances, maybe a company moves there, in 5 years is worth $1.5 million. But for the most part, the reason everyone pays the most for beachfront property, the best properties in certain states that don't have high taxes, right? Certain areas in every city that are just more desirable for a reason. It's no different than quarterback, right? If you try to get cute and there's a huge element of luck involved, you always got to invest high if you think the guy can play, because it's just that important of a position and so much of it's out of your control. So if you like the guy, surely many other people like the guy, just draft the guy. John, your podcast is the best sports podcast I've ever come across. Jacob, you are a good man. My friends and I are in agreement that this is a lot of just giving me a reach around, so we'll just jump to the question. Who is your favorite NFL player of all time and why? What makes them stand out in your mind? I was thinking about this the other day because I was watching the Barry Sanders documentary. And I've always had this kind of thing that it's much easier to get famous now because of the internet. Like when I was growing up in the 90s, pre-internet, whenever the internet really took off, I would say early 2000s. But like in the 90s, if you were really famous, it meant you were really fucking famous, because it meant you had access to TV, the magazines, the newspapers. Like you had to be on those places to be big. Now, like I could just be a guy that has an enormous, YouTube channel / Instagram / TikTok and be a guy that millions of people know about. But if you were Barry Sanders, because I was watching the Barry Sanders documentary and I'm like, Barry Sanders was fucking famous when I was a kid. I mean, he was on a joke franchise team, yet every kid that played pickup football, that played high school football, that played peewee football, thought at one point in time until you realize you're too slow, like I want to do moves like Barry Sanders. And I would say there was a crew of guys in the 90s that I kind of grew up on. it would be Brett Favre, Steve Young, Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, Deion Sanders, right? Reggie White, kind of that crew. I think Barry Sanders and Brett Favre were two of my favorite players growing up. I mean, I grew up a Niner fan, but a lot like baseball, you like love Cal Ripken, or you love Ken Griffey Jr., or in basketball, like I love Gary Payton. Just these guys were national stars, and Charles Barkley, whoever. And I would say Barry Sanders and Brett Favre were just, and then I love Ray Lewis probably into high school for sure. Just how good he was at football. So yeah, that would probably be my answer. How do I order one of those 3-and-out hats? You just go to thevolume.com and you search 3-and-out merch and you get one of these FlexFit hats. Really easy to do. I think the NFL has evolved too much to have a motivator as your head coach. If your offensive coordinator is talented and gets a head coaching job, you're screwed. I know the Eagles could never have done it, but I believe they would have been better with Shane Steichen at the helm. Sirianni, Tomlin, and others are replaceable, but amazing play caller isn't. Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. I think in this modern day time, especially the way guys are wired, in the 80s and the 90s, nutrition, no one talked about like gut health. No one talked about the offseason workout plan for 9 straight months. Historically, like in the 70s and 80s, guys would show up in training camp after drinking beer and smoking cigarettes all year. So most guys now, I bet if you went around the NFL and all the good teams, their top 15 players, and just found out like how seriously they took nutrition, how seriously they take sleep, how seriously they take working out, how seriously they take training, it's probably pretty high. It's definitely higher than it's ever been just because of the information we have, from cold tubs to saunas to like everything to a science, sleep chambers. So to have some motivator, most of these guys are pretty self-motivated. They really are. Now, part of life is sometimes, you need to be coached up or you need to be pushed. But I believe in pro sports now more than ever in the history of the game. There are more guys. Now, there have always been guys who are intrinsically motivated, intrinsically focused, just driven at the highest humanly possible levels. But I think on the aggregate, there are way more of those on good teams now than ever before. So I'm with you. It's like, why does Andy Reid have a lot of success? Because it's an intellectual game. Like, I'm scheming versus you. I'm not worried on a daily basis about pushing every guy to the limit. Half these guys are already pushing themselves to the limit. So it's much more about like, how do I put you in the position to succeed? I don't think there's a question. Now, they couldn't have fired him. And I'm not saying he should have been fired, but if you just polled the 32 GMs right now, Shane Steichen or Nick Sirianni, and this is going to sound like I'm shitting on Nick Sirianni, but it's just, I think it would be, I don't know if it'd be 32 of 32, but it would be fucking high. Shane Steichen over Sirianni. Because I know for a fact what Shane Steichen does. What does Nick do? Prints out t-shirts, gives some Rocky speeches. Okay. But like, does Hassan Reddick, does AJ Brown need a rah-rah speech? Or does they just need to be told like where to go? What play we should run against this defense? That's why Urban Meyer, and listen, I'm not, those guys we've talked about, Sirianni, Harbaugh, Tomlin, like they have nothing in common with Urban. Urban couldn't last a season. But the only pitch Urban had was like this motivation stuff. Now his motivation stuff to pros are like, fuck you, bro. I make $15 million a year. I make more than you. But he's not a scheme guy. There's no schematic advantage for him. The NFL is all about upstairs. It's all about outthinking your opponent Monday, Tuesday, and then implementing with your players Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So we can travel or get ready for Saturday and then obviously Sunday. Right? And that's what the NFL is. It's not like, it's why when you watch the Lions, like, I mean, Dan Campbell is a good leader, but that only goes so far. So I love that DM because I totally agree. Something magical happens when the third quarter ends and the fourth quarter begins. The energy changes. The fourth quarter is where games are won, where champions are made. And in business, it's where sales teams become legends. That's why HubSpot built Sales Hub to give sales reps the deal-making tools they need to win in Q4 and close the year strong. Sales Hub, prospecting workplaces, organizes your schedule, goals, and to-do lists in one place to save your team precious fourth quarter time. Smart sequences help sales reps close deals faster than ever. And with an easy-to-use deal management tool, reps can find, track, and close deals all in one place. Plus, AI forecasting helps you accurately predict future success, which means less hoping for deals and more crushing targets. Put your sales team on the fast track to winning Q4 with Sales Hub. Learn more at HubSpot.com/sales. Hey, John, this is from Emmett. What do you think is the best plan moving forward for the Vikings quarterback situation? Dobbs clearly isn't franchise-level quarterback. True. Cousins is coming off an Achilles, and his contract's over. Should they consider drafting a quarterback, re-sign Kirk? Thanks. Love the pod. Very, very tough question. I think you can only re-sign Cousins if it's a small number. You just can't risk at his age. He's not a great athlete. It just being over. Because even if you re-signed him to 1 year, $30 million, which if he's playing like he was just playing would be a great number. But what if he's a shell of himself? Then you're screwed. If you could re-sign him on like a $15 million contract, but if he plays like he did, that thing kicks into like $35, $40 million, I would do something like that. Very incentive-based, touchdowns, games played. And maybe he's rich enough, likes it enough that he would do that. But I could not sign him to a lot of guaranteed money. And it's just the injury. It's just basic math. He's over the hill of 35. He's going to be 36 next year. This is a major injury. He's not a great athlete. So I would say try to do something very outside the box is probably the wrong way to put it, but incentive laced, and then try to draft a guy. But your team, you might make the playoffs. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult. I'm a regular watcher of the show. If you can, I need you to make this a mailbag question, or I need this own show because it's important. I'm a Raiders fan that is from Oakland, California. I understand outsiders' view that the city is a mess, but the exact reason there is no home field advantage is because the fan base was and still is in Oakland. My question to you is, even if the organization puts a winner on the field, will things change? I personally don't think there will because of how much of a destination Vegas is, but the price you pay when you leave loyal fans behind. Well, here's the problem, and this is where they were stuck. I don't think economically you guys could have survived in Oakland. One, Mark didn't have the money to build his own stadium. He needed help. And in Vegas, they're run a lot more like the mob. They passed the tax to build the stadium in a room of 12 people. There was no like city vote. It just got a bunch of yays, and then it passed. Why? Because the Adelsons, who just bought in the Mavericks, that's the way shit works in Vegas. That he was never going to get private funding in the Bay Area. It was never going to happen. Right? The reason Joe Lacob has the Chase Center is he funded it himself. They got it done. It doesn't mean you couldn't have got some subsidies, but what Jed York did was something that was never going to happen again. And I think they didn't have the money at the time either, but they deal with the city a lot, and it's a pain in the ass. So I hear you that the fans are never going to go. It's just a destination place, like you said. It's very cool for every other team coming, their fan base. But it wasn't plausible and feasible economically for you guys to stay in Oakland. And like I've said before, I was pounding the table partly because the radio station I worked for at the time had the Raiders. I didn't want them to leave, but it's the right move. Now, it's not a great move for your stadium in terms of the home field, but in terms of the money it gets you, the value of the franchise whenever the Davis family sells, it's the right move for the league. And they just couldn't have sustained. No one could sustain in Oakland. It's why do you know the reason Joe Lacob wanted to buy the Warriors? To get them the fuck out of Oakland to San Francisco. The A's are a disaster. And you'd be like, well, they don't spend any money. They don't have any fans. I've seen their radio ratings. We had the A's as well as the Raiders. And when they were winning 95, 100 games, no one listened. No one cared. When the Giants are winning 95 games, their radio station does like 20 shares. It's like, it'd be like, it's not the Yankees and the Mets. It's like the Yankees and the Pirates or something. I mean, it's just, The 49ers suck so much oxygen economically, and it wasn't. He was in a tough spot, and he had to go, and he knew it. He couldn't sustain there. He couldn't. And I will give him this, is he was honest. The A's pretended rooted in Oakland. You didn't give a shit. You guys were never going to stay. Which, again, I don't care about fake slogans and stuff, but I'll give Mark Davis this. He was very honest for the most part. What's your take on DK being so easily aggravated and not being able to control his emotions? Now, I just think it's maturity. Most of us men at certain points in time of our life have to grow up. I could be a hothead, still can. I had a freak out earlier today because something happened with the internet. So I can relate and understand it. The older you get, the more you have to work on controlling your emotions, right? Especially as you work your way up professionally, as you have a family. In DK's spot, like he's depended upon on his team. You got to find a way. It's not like other guys throughout the league don't get emotionally worked up. You got to be able to. Part of discipline isn't just like getting up early, working out, training, eating the right food. It's being able to control yourself internally. And I'd argue not even if you play in the NFL, whatever the fuck you do, got to be able to control those emotions. Something I've battled with my entire life. Still battling with it. Think about it on a daily basis. Take a deep breath, control yourself, don't freak out. Because the moment you lose your emotions, it's a bad look. I don't care what you're doing, whether it's to a coworker, an employee. It doesn't mean that you're right or wrong. Like you're not always wrong about why you're worked up, but you got to try to control your emotions. And as a player, if you can't control your emotions, you're useless to your team because you're going to keep getting tossed out of games. I mean, let's face it, DK Metcalf's kind of a disaster right now. Here's part of the problem. Pete allows it. Jamal Adams making fun of some dude's wife because he said yikes on a tweet when he got smoked. Like Jamal, I say this about DK, at least DK's like one of the all-time great talents. I mean, he's like Terrell Owens. Jamal, you can't cover a soul. And you're making fun of this guy's wife who really wasn't even that bad looking. Like, you're just kind of a loser. I don't think DK is necessarily a loser at all. I just think he can't control himself. But Pete loves that crap. And it works when you have a bunch of good players, but if you don't, you got problems. And right now they clearly got some problems. Sad Panthers fan here. Would you rather have Bryce Young or Zach Wilson? Oh my God. I'll say this. I watched, bits and pieces of the Saints game. He looks terrible. He looks really, really bad. And he's going to get a full-on free pass. The organization, the coaches, the crazy owner, and rightfully so. You deserve to get a pass when you're in that much turmoil. But you cannot dispute, if you watch the Panthers play, he looks fucking terrible. Incompletions, flying over a guy's head, no rhythm, no feel. He looks like an awful player. And that would scare me. Now, that's happened before. Guys turning around. Trevor Lawrence looked awful, though Trevor was much bigger. Alex Smith was terrible forever. So it's not by any means over. It's not, the book hasn't been written, but I do think it's fair to be very, very concerned. And Zach Wilson is more physically gifted. He's bigger, he's faster, and he's definitely got a stronger arm. But I can't trust Zach Wilson. He has one good half. That to me is that's a tease. Now, if he does it again against the Dolphins, okay, we'll start talking. Maybe there is something there. Maybe he's kind of figured it out. But I would take Bryce because there's much more unknown. I would say the Jets would be better if Bryce was there. He would look better, would be my assumption. Could be wrong. Okay, one more question. Listening to Colin's instant reaction, everything you say is right about everything in football. God, I got some smart listeners. It's time people start respecting Purdy as one of the great quarterbacks. Also, big golfer in love, live in PGA takes. I did a video last week on Rahm leaving the PGA Tour, going to live. Though texting with some people in the know, it does feel inevitable that both these two things are going to come together. So maybe it'll be short-lived, but what a shit show. And it's funny. I had a lot of people after Rahm left, they start DMing me, tweeting at me, do you think that this could ever happen in the NFL? The reason the professional PGA Tour was susceptible to this, they were not a well-run business. Their leadership was bad. They were not making as much money as they potentially could have, and because the way they're run as a 501c, which is a charitable organization that isn't taxed, they can't put their players on salary. It's a very complicated formula that was ripe to be surrounded and taken over, hostile takeover, especially when it came to the Saudis. The NFL is one of America's great businesses. They're America's number one television show. Everyone in the NFL, coaches, general managers, players, is getting rich. They hand out live contracts. And then I started thinking, the sport that is ripe for a live takeover is the NBA. Their ratings are in the tank. He's lost half his viewers, Adam Silver, since he's taken over. They have a new media rights deal that is up here in a year or two. And ESPN, TNT, some of his partners are bleeding money. They're cutting costs. If he wants to do deal with the streamers, well, everything's based on views. So it's like, why would we give you more money than you got last time when your audience has disappeared? That's not the way business works. To me, the Saudis could throw enough money around. They can get involved fast. And the NBA might become very, very desperate. Because I've been saying this forever. The NFL's media rights deal keeps going up. Why? They add more people watching. You can't double your media rights deal when half your audience disappear. It makes no sense. Do you know one of the worst business deals currently is the one ESPN and TNT have with the league? They have paid an astronomical amount of money for certain numbers that have not been delivered. And when I think about the Saudis, now, part of the reason they got into golf, the guy Yasser, who is the prince's right-hand man, loves the sport. So maybe he doesn't like basketball. But if he did and wants to become involved, I would be circling them like great white sharks, because it could get very ugly very fast for Adam Silver, who I don't think will be the commissioner in a couple of years, a lot like Jay Monahan, who's surely out. And I think they would be ripe if you can throw some $1 billion around to get involved and get involved fast and kind of bail them out of a situation that could get really, really ugly. I've said for a while, I don't think Mark Cuban just sold because he was going to run for president. When Mark Cuban made all of his money was right before the .com bubble burst in the early 2000s. He timed it perfectly. Became a billionaire, .com crash. He fucking got out of the fire, right? Are we sure he's not doing that now? Are we sure he's not doing that? Does he not see what's on the horizon? That would be my guess. And I'm not some like, well, you're just an NFL bootlicker. Well, if they were having the same problems as the NBA, I'll promise you this, I would not be acting like things are going well. And that I also think is a huge problem for the difference in the two sports. In the NFL, when things are going well, the media treats it like politics. It's just very critical 24/7. Like, it's hard to hide. In the NBA, it's always just like a fluff fest. Even when things aren't going well, it's like, guys, we got some issues. And I don't know. It's kind of crazy. There are a lot of different variables and dynamics for that reason. Don't quite understand it all. Don't really care. But bottom line is the two sports are not covered the same, and one sport's printing cash and the other one's got some issues on the horizon. So keep an eye on the Saudis getting involved there. Okay, before we get out of here, it's time for the Uber Eats player. I do coach as well. I thought might give almost anything to redo their game. Brought to you by my friends at Uber Eats. And I think it has to be Mike McDaniel. Someone sent me last night, I'm recording this on Tuesday, the win probability. They were up 27-13 with 3 minutes left. Their win probability was almost like 98, 99%, which we can argue win probability. But I would agree, when it's 23, when you're up multiple scores and you're playing that team, it felt like 100%. At one point in time in the fourth quarter, I thought Dolphins were going to end up winning like 40-13. And I'm watching the end of DeVito. I'm taking some notes, getting ready for the show, and I kind of look up, and they just scored. And they made it 27-21. Obviously, they go 3 and out, give it back, score again. They hit Hopkins over the middle. The Dolphins are not going on the road and winning playoff games. Having the number 1 overall seed, I've said over and over, I was going to take them seriously. Middlekauff, you're a Tua hater. If you told me they're hosting games at the Hard Rock Cafe, or whatever they call it, Hard Rock Stadium, I'd be like, I take Miami seriously with If Hill's healthy, with Waddle, Vic Fangio figuring it out on defense, they're not going anywhere if they're the 3 seed. And if you got to go to Kansas City, if you got to go to Baltimore, I'm sorry, it's just not happening. So that was a devastating loss. I mean, devastating. I can imagine Mike McDaniel did not sleep at all on Monday night. That was this week's almost anything coach of the week. And you can order almost anything with Uber Eats, the official on-demand partner of the NFL. Order now